Admiral Sarah Chen, was having her morning coffee when the world collapsed. The Pentagon cafeteria was unusually quiet that March morning in 2019. She'd arrived early, as she always did, 0530 hours, to review classified briefings on the South China Sea situation before her senior staff meeting at 8. The coffee was terrible, black and bitter, but it was hot and it helped her think. She sat in her corner office on the third floor, the one with windows overlooking Arlington, and she scrolled through her secure email terminal. That's when she saw it. A message from her Chief of Staff, Captain Derek Morrison, with subject line, "Urgent Press Inquiry." Her stomach tightened. In her 32 years of naval service, she'd learned that those 4 words never preceded anything good. Morrison's message was brief. Multiple news outlets requesting comment on leaked memo regarding South China Sea intelligence protocols. They're asking if you authorized Operation Sentinel without full congressional notification. First calls came in at 4:23 this morning. Recommend we get ahead of this immediately. Sarah's hands went cold. Operation Sentinel was classified, deeply classified. Only 12 people in the entire United States government knew the specifics, and now, apparently, journalists did too. She pulled up CNN on her desktop, something she rarely did during work hours. The headline made her blood pressure spike. Leaked memo, REVALS classified intelligence breach. Navy Admiral under fire for unauthorized operations. The article was detailed, too detailed. Someone had given journalists the operational framework, timeline, and even snippets of classified briefing language. The reporting suggested that she, Admiral Sarah Chen, the first female commander of the Pacific Fleet, had recklessly authorized a covert intelligence operation without proper oversight. The language was careful, stopping short of direct accusations, but the implication was devastating. She'd circumvented protocol, hidden information from Congress, and put American lives at risk for strategic ambition. Sarah read it 3 times, hoping each reading would reveal it as a nightmare. It didn't. Her office door burst open. Captain Morrison stood in the doorway, his face ashen. Behind him, she could see other staff members with their phones pressed to their ears, their voices urgent and panicked. "It's everywhere," Morrison said. CNN, Washington Post, New York Times. They're all running with variations of the same story. The Post is already calling the Pentagon asking for your resignation. Anderson Cooper is doing a segment tonight titled, "Can the Admiral Stay?" Admiral Chen, I don't understand how this happened. This is a code word program. The classification level should have prevented. I know what the classification level is, Captain, Sarah said quietly, cutting him off. She was staring at her computer screen, but her mind was elsewhere, already calculating trajectories of disaster. Get me legal, and get me the Secretary of the Navy. I want to talk to him before this spirals further. But it was already spiraling. By noon, Sarah's phone was a cascading nightmare of missed calls. Politicians from both parties were demanding comment. Fox News was asking whether political correctness in the military had compromised national security. MSNBC was suggesting she'd been the victim of a witch hunt. CNN kept cycling through the same footage of her speaking at a press conference 6 months earlier, the images repeated until they became accusatory. A congressman she'd briefed personally had already called for an investigation on the House floor. Another congressman had suggested she should resign for the good of the service. Her inbox flooded with emails from colleagues, some cautious expressions of support, "We believe in you, and just wait until the facts come out." But others were conspicuously absent, phone calls that went unreturned, lunch invitations that were suddenly canceled. The sharks could smell blood in the water and they were circling. By 15:30 hours, the Pentagon's Public Affairs Office released an official statement. The Department of Defense takes all allegations seriously. We have initiated a full investigation into the matter and will cooperate fully with appropriate oversight committees. Admiral Chen remains in her current position pending the outcome of this investigation. It was a bureaucratic death sentence, dressed up in procedural language. That evening, Sarah sat in her Arlington home, a modest four-bedroom colonial that she and her husband Michael had bought 15 years earlier when she was a four-star captain. Michael brought her a glass of wine she didn't ask for and sat beside her on the couch. They'd been married for 28 years. He'd supported every posting, every late night at the office, every sacrifice their family made for her career. Now he sat in silence because there was nothing to say. The television showed her face. Different angles, different moments, but always her face. Serious, commanding, authoritative. The very qualities that had made her successful now seemed to confirm the narrative of arrogance and recklessness. A retired three-star admiral she'd respected for decades went on television and said, "I always had concerns about her command style. Too aggressive, not collaborative enough." Sarah had mentored that admiral. She'd pushed for his promotion. By 10 that night, her chief of staff called. His voice was strained. "Admiral, I need to inform you that an official investigation has been opened. The Inspector General's office will be contacting you tomorrow to begin formal interviews. They're also going to want to access your personal email, your calendar, and all communications related to Operation Sentinel. There's more." He paused. "Your security clearance is being suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. You're to report to the Pentagon tomorrow morning for briefing, and then you're being relieved of active command. You'll be on administrative leave effective immediately." The words felt like physical blows. Relieved of command, her command, the Pacific Fleet, the largest naval fleet in the world. She'd worked her entire life for that position, had been the first woman to hold it, had taken pride in every decision, every sailor under her care. And now she was being suspended like a schoolchild caught cheating. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat in her home office, reading and rereading the classified memos on her secure terminal, searching for any possible explanation for how they'd been leaked. The documents were accurate, dangerously, devastatingly accurate, but they were also being presented in a context that twisted their meaning entirely. Someone had taken her strategic decisions and reframed them as recklessness. Someone had taken her intelligence assessment and called it unauthorized overreach. By dawn, she understood with terrifying clarity. Someone wanted her destroyed. And they'd succeeded. The question was why. The Inspector General's office was located in a nondescript building in Crystal City, Virginia, the kind of place designed to disappear into the landscape. Sarah had been here 3 times a week for the past 6 months, walking through the same entrance, riding the same elevator, sitting in the same interview room with the same lead investigator, Deputy Inspector General Patricia Kelso. Kelso was thorough, methodical, without mercy. The questioning began at 800 hours on a Monday morning in March. By June, nothing had changed except Sarah's capacity to endure it. Kelso would ask the same questions in different orders, watching for inconsistencies. Where was Sarah when Operation Sentinel was approved? Who did she consult? What was her reasoning? Did she inform the appropriate congressional committees? Why did she use the particular phrasing in her classified memo? Could she explain why 3 subordinates had expressed concerns that were now documented in official records? Those concerns were devastating. Lieutenant Commander James Wang, Sarah's deputy, had apparently told his supervisor that he had reservations about the Admiral's judgment on the South China Sea approach. Wang was a by-the-book officer, meticulous and careful. He'd also been passed over for a promotion that Sarah had recommended for Captain Michael Torres, her operations director. Captain Torres had been Sarah's strategic partner for 4 years. Together, they developed the South China Sea intelligence framework. Wang had always been cordial to her face, but apparently had been feeding doubts to his chain of command. Then there was the matter of the classified briefing she'd given to the Intelligence Committee. 7 members of Congress had been in that room. 2 of them suddenly had problems with her characterization of the intelligence. Both were up for re-election. Both were being pressured by constituents to take strong stances on China. It was politically advantageous to question Sarah's judgment. But the worst was Captain Marcus Reed. Reed had been Sarah's executive officer for 2 years before being reassigned. He was brilliant, politically connected, and ambitious. Sarah had actually recommended him for accelerated promotion. When word came down that he was being reassigned to Naval Station Norfolk, he'd seemed grateful, even honored. But then, during his investigator interview, Reed had told the Inspector General that he'd been concerned about the Admiral's willingness to work within established protocols. He'd suggested her command structure was informal, and her decision-making process sometimes lacked proper oversight. All technically defensible statements, all carefully worded, all designed to create a portrait of a brilliant but reckless officer. Sarah reviewed her own interview transcripts each night, reading Reed's words over and over. She remembered praising him in front of the entire command staff. She remembered writing the commendation that went into his service record. She remembered, vividly, telling him that he had a bright future in the Navy, that she saw him becoming an admiral someday. Now he was helping destroy her. The psychological toll was worse than the institutional one. Sarah had always been defined by her work. The Navy was her identity. When that was stripped away, she had nothing to lean on. Michael tried to help. Her sister called every Sunday from San Francisco with encouragement. A few close friends maintained contact, but most people disappeared. Invitations dried up. She was removed from the Navy Wives Association board. A dinner party she and Michael were supposed to attend was canceled. The hosts were concerned about optics. She passed colleagues in the Pentagon who used to embrace her, and they suddenly became intensely interested in their phones. One woman she'd worked with for 6 years literally turned and walked the other direction when she saw Sarah approaching in the hallway. The most painful was Admiral Thomas Warren, the Navy's second-highest ranking officer and someone Sarah had considered a mentor. He'd been instrumental in her rise through the ranks. She kept a photo of them together, from her promotion to 4-star Admiral 5 years earlier, on her office desk. Warren released a statement through his public affairs office saying he was disappointed by the allegations and that he had always stressed the importance of working within established frameworks. The implication was clear: Sarah hadn't. The media coverage remained relentless. A cable news host dedicated an entire segment to analyzing the character flaws that led to Admiral Chen's downfall. A think tank released a report suggesting that inadequate military leadership structures had contributed to the scandal. Someone leaked a photo of Sarah looking stern during a command briefing. The image was used repeatedly on news broadcasts with captions like "Admiral Chen, question leadership," and "scandal-plagued commander." In April, a major biography was scheduled for release, Breaking Barriers: The Rise of America's First Female Fleet Admiral. The publisher quietly shelved it. The author, who Sarah had cooperated with extensively, released a statement saying he was troubled by recent revelations. He'd been granted exclusive access to her personal journals, had interviewed dozens of her subordinates, and had spent 18 months documenting her career. Now she was reading think pieces, questioning whether the book would ever be published. By May, Sarah had developed insomnia that no medication could touch. She'd drop off around 2 a.m. and wake at 3:45, her mind racing through legal documents and interview transcripts. Michael would find her in the dark living room at dawn, still in the same position she'd been in at midnight, staring at nothing. Her lawyer, Richard Brennan, was expensive and thorough. He'd brought in a retired judge to review the investigation process. They'd identified procedural problems, witnesses not being properly checked for bias, documents being presented selectively, the investigation framework itself seeming designed to confirm the initial allegations rather than discover the truth. But procedure and justice weren't the same thing, Brennan explained. The court of public opinion didn't require due process. In late May, Sarah received a message from someone she didn't expect, Captain Michael Torres, her operations director and close colleague. They met in person at a coffee shop in Arlington. Torres looked nervous, like he was doing something dangerous. "Admiral, I can't stay long," he said, looking around to make sure no one was watching. "But I need you to know something. Wang came to me last month. He was asking questions about Operation Sentinel, very specific questions, questions about approval chains and decision points. At first I thought he was just trying to understand the operation better, but then I realized he was trying to find inconsistencies, trying to build a case against you." Sarah's heart stopped. "Did he find anything?" "No, there's nothing to find. Your decision-making was sound. The operation was authorized properly. Everything was by the book." Torres paused. "But I realized something else, Admiral. Wang wasn't acting independently. Someone had to have put him up to this. Someone who knew exactly what to look for. Someone who understood naval protocols well enough to weaponize technicalities." "Who?" Sarah leaned forward. "I don't know, but whoever it is, they're still in the Navy. They're still in a position of influence, and they haven't finished yet." Torres left before she could ask more questions. She never saw him in person again. 3 weeks later, his transfer orders came through, unexpected reassignment to a desk job in Hawaii. He tried calling her twice, but both calls went to her lawyer instead. The message was clear: if you help the Admiral, you pay the price. By June, the Inspector General's office released its preliminary findings. Sarah sat in a conference room with Brennan as Kelso presented the conclusions. "Our investigation has found no evidence of deliberate misconduct or violation of federal law on Admiral Chen's part. However, we note that certain protocols in her command structure appear to have been informally managed, and her decision-making processes sometimes lacked the documentary evidence of oversight that one would expect in operations of this classification level." Translation: "We can't prove she did anything wrong, but we're going to suggest that she did it anyway." It was the worst possible outcome. She was cleared but not vindicated, exonerated but still guilty in everyone's eyes. The ambiguous language gave her enemies exactly what they needed: plausible deniability while maintaining the appearance of wrongdoing. Brennan looked at her across the table. His face was grave. "Admiral, whoever set this in motion has won. Even if we fight back, even if we prove your complete innocence beyond any doubt, the damage is irreparable. Your career is over. Your reputation is destroyed. I'm sorry." Sarah stared at the investigation report in front of her. 6 months of her life, 6 months of being publicly crucified, and she was back where she started, accused, but with no way to prove her accuser wrong. Because she still didn't know who the accuser was. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in August, 8 months after the scandal began. Sarah was in bed, reading a novel she couldn't focus on when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Admiral Chen." The voice was young, panicked, barely controlled. "My name is Marcus Webb, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb. I need to talk to you. I need to tell you the truth." Sarah sat up. Her lawyer had explicitly told her never to speak directly to anyone connected to the case without legal representation present. But something in Webb's voice, genuine terror, genuine regret, made her listen. "I can't do this on the phone," Webb continued. "I need to meet you in person, tomorrow. I'm going to go to the FBI field office in Arlington. I'm going to tell them everything. But I wanted you to hear it from me first. I owe you that much." The line went dead. Sarah didn't sleep. She called Richard Brennan at midnight. Her lawyer was furious at first. This could be a trap, a setup, something to further incriminate her. But when Sarah explained the fear in Webb's voice, Brennan's opposition softened. "Don't talk to him directly," Brennan warned. "But be there, bring me. We need to know what he's about to say before the FBI does." Webb walked into the FBI's Arlington field office at 900 hours on Wednesday morning. Sarah and Brennan waited in a secure conference room 3 floors above, watching on a closed-circuit camera. Webb was in his early 30s, naval dress uniform impeccable, but his hands shook as he sat across from FBI Special Agent Margaret Holder. He started crying within 30 seconds. "I fabricated the entire thing," Webb said, his voice breaking. "The memos, the intelligence briefing excerpts, all of it. I doctored documents. I stole classified communications. I created a false narrative that made Admiral Chen look incompetent and reckless, and I did it because someone paid me." In the room above, Sarah's knees literally buckled. Brennan caught her arm. "Tell me everything," Agent Holder said, her voice professional and calm. Webb took a shaking breath. "Captain Marcus Reed approached me in January. He said he had an opportunity for me, a guaranteed position at the Naval War College, and a recommendation for accelerated promotion. All I had to do was help him with something. He said he had concerns about Admiral Chen's leadership and wanted to document them. He said the Navy needed to know what was really happening in her command." Marcus Reed, the man she'd mentored, the man she'd recommended for promotion. "Reed gave me documents to alter," Webb continued. "He showed me exactly what to change, what to emphasize, what to take out of context. He told me which journalists to contact. He had connections, people who would run the story if it was sensational enough. He said Admiral Chen had overstepped her authority and someone needed to hold her accountable. It made sense at first. It sounded patriotic, like I was protecting the Navy." "When did you start having doubts?" Agent Holder asked. "Immediately," Webb said. "But I was in too deep. The story was already out. My name wasn't attached to it, so I thought I could just disappear. I thought it would blow over. But it didn't blow over. It destroyed her. I watched Admiral Chen get destroyed in real time, and I knew I'd done it. I knew I'd lied and lied systematically to take down a woman who'd never done anything to me except exist in a position that Reed wanted." Webb's confession continued for 4 hours. He provided everything. Documents showing exactly which communications had been altered. Emails between himself and Reed discussing the operation. Bank records showing Reed had transferred money to Webb's account. Not much, just enough to seem like innocent reimbursements, but enough to prove quid pro quo. Screenshots of conversations where Reed had explicitly instructed Webb on what to fabricate. Reed had been meticulous, brilliant, even in a sinister way. He'd constructed a conspiracy that was just airtight enough to survive public scrutiny, but loose enough that Webb could be thrown under the bus if things went wrong. Webb had been the patsy the entire time. "Why are you coming forward now?" Agent Holder asked. Webb's jaw clenched. "Because I couldn't live with it anymore. I'm engaged to be married. I have a sister in the Navy who admires Admiral Chen. I couldn't stand in front of my fiancée and lie about who I was. And because what Reed did, it's going to happen to someone else if he's not stopped. He'll do this to the next person who blocks his ambitions. He's already planning something. I heard him on the phone last week talking about another operation, someone else he needs to take down. I couldn't let that happen." By afternoon, the FBI had arrested Captain Marcus Reed at his office in the Pentagon. He was escorted out in handcuffs in front of dozens of witnesses. The news broke within hours. Sarah watched it happen on her television, sitting in her lawyer's office. Reed's face, stern and dignified even as they led him away. The same face she'd seen at countless command meetings, the same face she'd trusted. Brennan squeezed her shoulder. "It's over, Admiral, you're vindicated." But Sarah didn't feel vindicated. She felt sick. The Pentagon's response came through official channels by evening. A press release stating that preliminary evidence suggests that the allegations against Admiral Sarah Chen were based on fabricated documents and false information provided by Officer Webb, who acted under the direction of Captain Marcus Reed, now under federal investigation. It was clinical, bureaucratic, as if the destruction of her career could be undone with a press release. The story exploded across all media outlets, but in a strange way. Some networks led with Admiral exonerated in stunning reversal, while others framed it as scandal-plagued Admiral's name cleared, but questions remain. One cable news host suggested that even if the documents were fabricated, that didn't necessarily mean the concerns about her judgment were unfounded. Another host called it a cautionary tale about the dangers of whistleblowing, somehow making Webb's confession about ethics rather than conspiracy. The court of public opinion remained unconvinced. Sarah had been convicted in the court of television, and no amount of evidence could truly acquit her. That night, Webb requested a meeting with Sarah. Brennan was against it, potentially another trap, potentially something that could further complicate the legal situation. But Sarah insisted. She needed to hear it directly from the man who destroyed her. They met in a secure FBI conference room on Thursday morning. Webb was in prison jumpsuit, his naval uniform gone. He looked smaller somehow, younger, more human. His eyes were red-rimmed from crying. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. The words seemed inadequate even to him. "Admiral, I'm so deeply sorry. I betrayed you. I lied about you. I helped destroy your career and your reputation, and I did it for career advancement and because I was weak. I was ambitious and stupid, and I let someone manipulate me into doing something evil. There's no excuse. I know that. I've known it for months." Sarah studied his face for a long moment. She'd spent a lifetime reading people. It was part of what made her an excellent military officer. She could see genuine remorse in Webb's eyes. She could also see a young man who'd made a terrible choice and was now paying the price. "Why did you target me?" she asked quietly. "I didn't. Reed did. He wanted you specifically because you'd blocked his ambitions. You promoted tours instead of him. You put certain restrictions on his command that he resented. He hated you, Admiral, not because of anything you'd done wrong, but because you represented the kind of leader he wanted to be and couldn't become. So he decided to take you down, and he used me because I was desperate, ambitious, and stupid enough to go along." "What will happen to you?" Sarah asked. "Federal prison, probably 5 to 10 years, loss of my career, dishonorable discharge, everything I worked for gone." Webb paused. "Which is justice, I suppose. You lost everything too. At least I get to serve a sentence and maybe eventually move on. Your reputation, I don't know if that ever comes back completely." The truth of that statement hung between them like a blade. The Pentagon released the formal statement on December 12, 2019, exactly 9 months after the scandal began. Sarah read it in her lawyer's office, while Richard Brennan watched her face for reactions. Official statement from the Department of Defense. After a comprehensive investigation, the Department of Defense has determined that all allegations against Admiral Sarah Chen were based on falsified documents and fabricated evidence. Admiral Chen's decision-making regarding Operation Sentinel was sound, properly authorized, and consistent with all applicable protocols. The investigation found no evidence of misconduct, breach of protocol, or violation of federal law. Admiral Chen is fully exonerated. The department regrets any reputational harm caused by the initial allegations. That was it. 23 sentences to undo 9 months of destruction. Brennan tried to smile. "You did it, Admiral. You're vindicated." Sarah felt nothing. Or worse than nothing, she felt a hollow ache, the kind you get when you realize something precious can never be put back together, even if all the pieces are accounted for. The Pentagon's Public Affairs Office scheduled a press conference for the following day at the Navy News Service Auditorium. Sarah stood at the podium with the Navy's Chief of Information, Rear Admiral William Morrison, alongside her. Morrison delivered remarks about the Navy's commitment to thorough investigations and due process. Then he opened the floor for questions. The journalists seemed simultaneously hungry and bored. "Admiral Morrison, does this vindication mean Admiral Chen will resume command of the Pacific Fleet?" asked a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. "Admiral Chen's previous command has been reassigned to another officer," Morrison said carefully. "We will be discussing appropriate next steps with Admiral Chen regarding her future assignments." Translation: You're cleared, but your old job is gone." A CNN reporter raised her hand. "Admiral Chen, how does it feel to be fully exonerated?" Sarah stepped forward to the microphone. She'd prepared for this question all night. She wanted to say something powerful, something that would reclaim her narrative. Instead, what came out was, "I'm grateful for the investigation's thorough work in determining the facts. I look forward to continuing to serve the Navy." It was the most bland, politician-speak thing she'd ever said, but any show of emotion would be characterized as bitterness. Any expression of anger would be seen as instability. So she said nothing, meant nothing, and felt everything privately. The press conference lasted 12 minutes. Most news outlets buried the story on page 7 of their websites. Some didn't cover it at all. CNN ran it at the bottom of their news hour. Fox News led with a different story. MSNBC had a brief segment in which a political analyst suggested that while the allegations appeared to be false, questions remain about Admiral Chen's overall leadership style and whether she was perhaps too aggressive in pursuing her strategic vision. The subtext was clear. Even if she didn't do this particular thing wrong, she probably did something else wrong. The vindication was incomplete, insufficient, and ultimately unsatisfying for a media ecosystem that had invested heavily in her guilt. That afternoon, Sarah's phone began ringing with official calls. The first was from the Secretary of the Navy, Thomas Spencer. "Admiral Chen, congratulations on your exoneration. This is a tremendous vindication. The President wanted me to personally convey his satisfaction that this matter has been resolved. We'd like to discuss your future role in the Navy." "Thank you, Mr. Secretary," Sarah said formally. "I'm thinking Pentagon assignment, Deputy Director of Naval Operations perhaps, or a role overseeing strategy and planning. These are prestigious positions, Admiral. You'd be working at the highest levels of defense planning." It was generous, carefully offered, and Sarah understood exactly what it was: a consolation prize, a desk job where they could keep her visible enough to seem supportive but removed enough that she wouldn't be a distraction or a reminder of the scandal. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Secretary. May I have time to consider?" "Of course, take a week. We'd like to move quickly, though." The second call was from the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Patricia Hawkins. "Sarah, I wanted to call personally. I'm proud of you. You handled this with dignity and grace. The Navy is fortunate to have you." But Hawkins didn't offer her a new command. She offered her sympathy, which was almost worse. By evening, Sarah had received formal job offers from 3 different Pentagon offices. Each one was prestigious in its own way. Each one was designed for someone who'd made a mistake but was being given a second chance. Sarah was being treated like she'd made a mistake, even though the investigation proved she hadn't. Michael found her in the study, surrounded by printed job descriptions and organizational charts. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I don't know. They're offering me a desk in the Pentagon. That's not really serving anymore, Michael. That's administration. That's being pushed aside with dignity. So don't take it. Take early retirement. We have enough saved. You've earned rest." Sarah shook her head. "I'm not ready to be put out to pasture. I'm 58 years old. I have more to give." Michael sat beside her. "Then what do you want?" Sarah didn't answer because she didn't know. What she wanted was impossible: to rewrite the last 9 months, to have her reputation restored not in a bureaucratic press release, but in the hearts and minds of people who turned their backs on her. She wanted Marcus Reed to have never existed. She wanted Marcus Webb to have made different choices. She wanted a world where conspiracy and jealousy didn't triumph so easily. But she didn't live in that world. Over the next week, Sarah did something unexpected. She requested access to the Naval Registry and looked at commanding officer postings available across the fleet. Most were desk positions or training commands or administrative roles, exactly what the Pentagon was offering her in different forms. Then she found it: Commander of Naval Base San Diego. It was a significant reduction in rank and responsibility from commanding the Pacific Fleet. It was also a real command, real authority, real sailors doing real work. It wasn't prestigious. It wasn't a pathway to further promotion. It was, essentially, a voluntary step down. She called Brennan. "I want to request this posting." Her lawyer was silent for a long moment. "Admiral, you've just been vindicated. You could have any major command in the Navy. Why would you request Naval Base San Diego?" "Because it's real," Sarah said simply. "Because the people there don't know me as the admiral who was accused of corruption. They'll know me as their commander. I can actually lead. I can actually make a difference. And maybe, if I prove myself through action rather than through titles, I'll actually feel vindicated instead of just being officially cleared." "That's not career advancement," Brennan said. "No," Sarah agreed. "It's something more important. It's a chance to be myself again instead of a symbol of injustice." The Pentagon approved her request without comment. It was an unusual choice. Normally, a just vindicated admiral would take a promotion, not a step down. Some military analysts wondered if she was mentally fit for command. Others suggested she was being punished for the scandal by her own request. None of them understood that this was an act of rebellion. On January 15, 2020, Admiral Sarah Chen drove through the gates of Naval Base San Diego for the first time as its commanding officer. The base sprawled before her, hundreds of buildings, thousands of personnel, decades of history. It wasn't the Pacific Fleet. It was infinitely smaller, infinitely less prestigious. But it was hers to lead. She pulled into the parking space marked Commander and sat in her car for a moment before stepping out. The sun was bright, the California air warm, the weight of the past 9 months somehow slightly lighter. She didn't know what was coming. She didn't know that the world was about to change in ways no one could predict. She didn't know that her choice to step down would become the foundation for something far greater than any promotion could have offered. She only knew that she was ready to stop being a victim and start being a leader again. She stepped out of the car, straightened her uniform, and walked toward her new command. Her first week at Naval Base San Diego should have been ceremonial. There would typically be a change of command ceremony, formal introductions, strategic planning sessions with her executive officer and senior staff. Admiral Sarah Chen expected the normal rhythm of military protocol. Instead, everything accelerated. On February 26, 2020, just 6 weeks after she assumed command, the first confirmed COVID-19 case appeared in San Diego County. By the first week of March, California had locked down. By mid-March, the nation was in crisis mode. Sarah sat in her headquarters at 600 hours on March 16, reviewing reports. The Pentagon was in chaos. No one knew what to do. Military bases across the country were scrambling to implement ad hoc protocols. Some bases were shutting down operations entirely. Others were pretending nothing had changed. Sarah knew better than to pretend. She called an emergency meeting with her senior staff, 16 officers responsible for everything from medical services to maintenance to supply chain. They gathered in her conference room, masked, sitting with unusual spacing, the physical distance a metaphor for their collective uncertainty. "Here's what we're going to do," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the anxiety in the room. "First, we're going to assume this is going to get worse before it gets better. Second, we're going to treat our people like they matter more than operational efficiency. Third, we're going to be transparent about everything. No surprises, no hidden information. And fourth, we're going to become a model for how a military installation handles this crisis." Captain James Patterson, her executive officer, leaned forward. "Admiral, those are admirable goals, but we don't have the medical capacity. We don't have enough masks or ventilators or testing capability. We're already stretched thin." "Then we improvise," Sarah said. "Start calling manufacturers. Get me supply chain options. I want us to produce masks here on base if we have to. I want us to set up testing stations at every entrance. I want medical personnel trained to handle potential cases. And I want us to do this without waiting for Pentagon approval. We'll ask forgiveness later if necessary." The room was silent. This kind of initiative, especially from a just vindicated admiral, could go wrong in spectacular ways. But Sarah had made peace with risk. The worst that could happen had already happened, and she'd survived it. Over the next 72 hours, Naval Base San Diego transformed. Sarah walked the base at irregular hours, sometimes 300 in the morning, sometimes 1900 in the evening. She wanted to see the real situation, not the polished version presented in briefings. She found maintenance crews working in unsafe conditions without proper protective equipment. She found sick sailors being housed in crowded barracks instead of isolated spaces. She found supply officers working with outdated inventory systems that made it impossible to track critical resources. She fixed each problem personally. For the protective equipment shortage, she discovered that the base had a textile manufacturing relationship through a long-time contractor. She called the contractor directly, not through bureaucratic channels, and negotiated an emergency production line. Within 2 weeks, Naval Base San Diego was producing 10,000 masks per day. For the sick quarters problem, she converted 3 dormitory buildings into isolation facilities, then brought in volunteers from the medical corps to staff them. She established a system where sailors could request room service delivered to their doors, reducing contact and maintaining dignity. For the inventory problem, she brought in a supply officer from the Pentagon who'd worked in logistics during the 2008 financial crisis. This officer, Commander Lisa Wong, became Sarah's right hand in crisis management. But the most important thing Sarah did was visible leadership. She showed up every day. She walked the supply lines. She sat with sailors in the dining facility, eating the same food they ate, asking about their families, their concerns, their fears. She visited the isolation facilities and talked to sick sailors face to face, masked but present. She made decisions in real time and took responsibility for those decisions. By mid-April, morale at Naval Base San Diego was higher than it had been in years, even under pandemic conditions. The metrics told the story. By May, San Diego had the lowest COVID-19 infection rate of any major military installation in the country. By June, it was the lowest of any installation worldwide. By September, the comparison was stark. San Diego had experienced 47 confirmed cases among a population of 8,000 personnel. Most comparable bases reported hundreds. The military health publication Military Medicine ran a feature on Sarah's protocols. It was framed as a case study in crisis leadership, not as vindication for her past troubles. That was important to Sarah. She didn't want to be interesting because of what had happened to her. She wanted to be interesting because of what she was doing now. But the vindication was there, woven through it all, silent and powerful. Word spread through the Navy. Officers requested assignment to San Diego. Enlisted personnel put in transfer requests. Sarah's leadership style, direct, compassionate, practical, became something people wanted to experience. She became known for knowing the names of junior sailors, for remembering details about their families, for caring about them as people rather than as personnel inventory. In July, a junior petty officer named Marcus Hernandez got COVID-19. He was a single father with an 8-year-old son living with his mother in nearby Escondido. Sarah personally visited Hernandez 3 times a week, brought food for his family, arranged for his mother to receive emergency base access so she could see her son. When Hernandez recovered after 6 weeks, Sarah was there to welcome him back. Hernandez later told a reporter, "Admiral Chen came to see me when I was sick. A 4-star admiral came to my isolation room just to check on me. That's not something that happens in the military, but it happened with her." That single story, published in a small San Diego publication, did more for Sarah's reputation than any Pentagon press release ever could. By August, Sarah made a decision that seemed counterintuitive. She organized an in-person ceremony for sailors receiving advancement promotions. The Navy wanted everything virtual. Sarah insisted on doing it properly, in person, with socially distanced protocols. "These sailors earned this," she told the Pentagon contact who was pushing back. "They served during the hardest time we've had in 70 years. They deserve to have their achievements recognized properly. We have the medical infrastructure to do it safely. We're doing it." The ceremony happened on August 15, 2020. 200 sailors received promotions in a modified parade ground setting, wearing masks, standing 6 feet apart but present and recognized in person. Sarah shook each one's hand. She'd memorized their names beforehand. She looked each of them in the eye and thanked them by name for their service. The video of that ceremony circulated through social media. It was different from anything else happening at military bases across the country. It was formal and warm, structured and personal, safe and celebratory. By October, when the pandemic's second wave hit, Naval Base San Diego was ready. Sarah had spent 6 months building systems, training personnel, and establishing trust. The second surge barely made a dent. The infection rate stayed low. The death rate remained 0. The Pentagon took notice. In November 2020, the Chief of Naval Operations personally called Sarah. "Admiral Chen, your leadership during the pandemic has been exemplary. The President has been briefed on your installation's performance. We're considering you for a position overseeing pandemic response protocols across the entire Navy." It was the kind of position that could lead to Admiral promotion, maybe even selection for the Joint Chiefs. It was the kind of opportunity that normally only came once in a career. Sarah asked for 48 hours to consider. She spent those 2 days walking Naval Base San Diego. She visited the testing stations where sailors worked tireless hours. She visited the isolation facilities where medical personnel cared for the sick. She visited the supply center where Lisa Wang's team worked around the clock to keep resources flowing. She visited the barracks where thousands of sailors slept and worked and lived. She thought about what she'd built here, not a reputation, not a position, a community, a place where people knew they were valued, a place where leadership meant something real. On the 3rd day, she called the Chief of Naval Operations back. "I appreciate the opportunity, sir, but I'm going to stay here at San Diego. I'm going to see this through. My people need me, and I need to be here." There was a long pause on the line. "Admiral, are you certain? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." "I am certain, sir. I had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity when I was exonerated. But the real opportunity, the real second chance isn't in the title. It's in the people who trust me again. I'm not leaving them." The Chief of Naval Operations understood. He was old enough to remember the cost of chasing rank over meaning. "Very well, Admiral, carry on." Sarah hung up the phone and looked out her window at Naval Base San Diego, shimmering in the California sun. The base that no one had wanted her to command. The position that everyone thought was beneath her. The place where she'd come to heal and had instead found something far more valuable than vindication. She'd found purpose again. The classified document arrived in Sarah's secure email on March 3, 2021, marked "For official use only, eyes only." She was in her office at Naval Base San Diego, reviewing quarterly personnel reports when the notification pinged. The sender was someone she didn't recognize, Dr. James Rothstein, Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence Analysis. The subject line read, "Request for immediate consultation Operation Sentinel assessment." Sarah opened it carefully. Encrypted emails containing classified material required specific protocols for handling. What she read made her hands shake. "Admiral Chen, I am writing to request your immediate consultation on a matter of significant strategic importance. During a routine audit of classified intelligence assessments conducted between 2018 and 2019, my team identified Operation Sentinel and reviewed the original intelligence briefings that prompted its authorization. I must inform you that your initial assessment of the South China Sea strategic situation was not merely accurate, it was prescient. The operation you authorized prevented what would have become a major international incident. Furthermore, the intelligence you relied upon to make your decision has proven to be completely accurate in every particular. The situation you predicted has unfolded exactly as you anticipated. I believe the Pentagon leadership needs to understand that your decision-making was not just sound, it was strategically brilliant. I am preparing a comprehensive report and would appreciate your input before it is finalized. Sarah read it 3 times. The operation she'd authorized had prevented a catastrophe. Her judgment, questioned and second-guessed and used as ammunition against her, had been correct. Not approximately correct, not defensively correct, completely, demonstrably, prescient-level correct. She immediately called Richard Brennan, her lawyer. "We need to talk about what this means." Brennan met her at a secure Pentagon facility that evening. They sat in a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, where classified documents could be discussed without surveillance concerns. "This is different from the exoneration," Brennan said slowly, reading the email on the secure terminal. "The exoneration cleared you of wrongdoing. This proves you were right. Legally and strategically, this is enormous." "What does it mean?" Sarah asked. "It means you weren't just vindicated. It means the people who questioned your judgment were proven wrong. It means your strategic vision was superior to the people questioning you. Admiral, this could change everything." Over the next week, Dr. Rothstein provided Sarah with the full classified analysis. She read through nearly 200 pages of detailed intelligence assessments, operational timelines, and strategic forecasts. What emerged was a clear picture of her original analysis. In 2018, Sarah had identified a pattern of Chinese naval activity in the South China Sea that suggested preparations for a major military exercise that could become something far more dangerous. Most intelligence analysts believed it was routine training activity. Sarah's assessment suggested it was preparation for a provocation, a deliberate confrontation designed to test American resolve and establish Chinese dominance in disputed waters. She'd recommended Operation Sentinel, a covert intelligence and counterpositioning operation designed to gather real-time information and establish American response capabilities without escalating to open conflict. The operation had been authorized. It had proceeded quietly, without public announcement, without the dramatic military posturing that would have triggered international incident protocols. Then, in late 2019, exactly as Sarah had predicted, China moved toward a major naval exercise that was thinly veiled preparation for seizing contested islands. But because Operation Sentinel was already in place, because Sarah's intelligence team was positioned and ready, and because American military response options were already prepared, the situation was diffused before it became critical. No shots fired, no international crisis, no military confrontation that could have escalated to something catastrophic. The Chinese exercise happened, but in a constrained form. American response was measured and professional. Allies in the region felt reassured. Potential escalation was prevented entirely. And Sarah's judgment had been the linchpin holding everything together. Dr. Rothstein's report was delivered to the Pentagon on March 15, 2021, addressed to the Secretary of the Navy, the Chief of Naval Operations, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Sarah received a copy. The report was detailed and undeniable. Admiral Chen's strategic assessment in 2018 demonstrated superior analytical capability compared to consensus intelligence community assessments. Her decision to authorize Operation Sentinel, while controversial and questioned by several senior officials, was strategically correct and prevented a potential military crisis that could have had severe international consequences. In retrospect, Admiral Chen's judgment has proven to be more accurate than that of officers with significantly more experience and seniority in intelligence analysis. Her leadership prevented what could have been a catastrophic misreading of Chinese intentions. Admiral Chen's rehabilitation should not merely clear her name, it should restore her status as one of the Navy's most strategic minds. The Pentagon's response came within hours. Secretary of the Navy Thomas Spencer called Sarah directly. "Admiral Chen, I've read the Rothstein report. I want to personally apologize for the anguish you endured. Your decision-making was not just correct, it was exceptional. The President has asked me to convey his gratitude for your strategic foresight. We would very much like to discuss your future role in the Navy." Sarah listened politely. "Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We're thinking Joint Chiefs assignment, maybe even consideration for Chairman of the Joint Chiefs down the line. You've proven yourself to be one of the finest strategic minds in our military. Admiral, you have the opportunity to shape naval policy for the entire nation." It was the kind of offer that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. It was the kind of position that represented the pinnacle of a military career. "Mr. Secretary, I appreciate the offer. May I have time to consider?" "Of course, but Admiral, I want you to know that the Pentagon is ready to make this right. Whatever you want, whatever position you're interested in, we will make it happen. You've earned it." After she hung up, Sarah sat in her office for a long time. She could feel the weight of the Pentagon's guilt. They wanted to make things right. They wanted to elevate her, promote her, put her in a position of ultimate authority as penance for the years she'd suffered. It was tempting, but something about it felt wrong. That evening, she met with Commander James Patterson, her executive officer and the man who would eventually become crucial to her story's final chapter. They sat in her office after hours, the base quiet around them. "They want me in the Pentagon," Sarah told him. "They're offering me a path to Chairman of the Joint Chiefs." Patterson's eyes widened. "Admiral, that's extraordinary." "It is," Sarah agreed. "But Patterson, I've been thinking about something. When they exonerated me, I took the San Diego posting. Everyone thought I was crazy. Everyone said I was wasting myself. But I've had the most meaningful year of my life commanding this base. I've actually led people. I've built something. I've made a real difference." "Yes, ma'am. If I leave now, I become another story. I become the vindicated admiral who rose to the pinnacle. I become about the past and the scandal and the redemption. But if I stay here," Sarah paused. "If I stay here, I remain focused on the future. I remain focused on the people who actually matter." Patterson chose his words carefully. "Admiral, with respect, you've been proven right about Operation Sentinel. You've been completely vindicated. Doesn't the Navy deserve your leadership at the highest levels?" "The Navy already has my leadership," Sarah said. "Right here. 8,000 sailors depend on me. They depend on me being present, being engaged, being their commander. If I leave them to chase a desk in the Pentagon, I'm abandoning the people who have come to trust me again." "Some people would say you have a responsibility to serve at the highest levels," Patterson offered. "Some people would say that," Sarah agreed. "But those people measure success in rank and titles. I've learned that success is measured in the people who look you in the eye and know that you're worthy of their trust. I have that here. I would lose it in the Pentagon." Sarah made her decision that night. She called the Secretary of the Navy the next morning. "Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you again for the opportunity. The Joint Chiefs assignment is something I never thought I'd be offered, and I'm honored by the confidence it represents, but I'm going to respectfully decline." There was shocked silence on the line. Admiral, did you understand what I was offering? I did, sir. I understood completely. But I have something more important to complete here at San Diego. My people depend on me. I came here to rebuild my reputation through action. I'm not finished with that work. I would appreciate the opportunity to complete my tour here. Admiral Chen, you don't have to prove anything anymore. You've been proven right about everything. I'm not trying to prove anything, sir. I'm trying to serve my people. That's what real leadership is. Not climbing the ladder. Actually serving those who depend on you. The secretary was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried genuine respect. Admiral, I think I finally understand what makes you such an exceptional officer. Carry on with your command. San Diego is fortunate to have you. When Sarah hung up, she felt something settle inside her. The vindication was complete, not because the Pentagon said so, but because she'd proven it to herself. She didn't need a title to validate her judgment. She didn't need a desk in the Pentagon to prove her worth. She had something more valuable. She had the trust of the people who served under her. She had proven her leadership through genuine action. She had chosen meaning over prestige. And that made all the difference. The invitation arrived on November 1, 2021. Secretary of the Navy Thomas Spencer would be visiting Naval Base San Diego to personally present Admiral Sarah Chen with the Distinguished Service Medal, the third highest decoration in the U.S. military, awarded for exceptionally meritorious service in a duty of great responsibility. Sarah read the invitation 3 times, not quite believing the words. "You deserve this," Michael said, looking over her shoulder at the formal document. "After everything you've done, everything you've endured, you deserve this recognition." Sarah wasn't sure about deserving anything, but she understood that the medal wasn't really about her anymore. It was about something larger, about demonstrating that the Navy could recognize its mistakes and honor integrity. It was about showing her sailors that doing the right thing, even when invisible, eventually matters. The ceremony was scheduled for November 12, 2021. Word spread through Naval Base San Diego quickly. This wasn't just an awards ceremony. This was public acknowledgement that their commander, the woman who'd led them through a pandemic, who knew their names, who cared about them as people, had been vindicated at the highest levels. Personnel began requesting leave that would bring them back to the base on the 12th. Supply officers worked overtime to ensure the parade grounds would be pristine. The Public Affairs Office coordinated with local media, understanding that this event would draw significant coverage. But Sarah kept it simple in her own preparation. She polished her dress uniform, had her shoes shined, and made sure her medals were arranged correctly. She didn't give speeches or prepare remarks. She simply committed to being present for whatever the day would bring. The morning of November 12 was crystalline, a perfect San Diego autumn day, the kind of weather that seems to justify the base's existence in one of the world's most beautiful locations. Sarah arrived at the parade grounds at 800 hours. It was empty then, just her and the maintenance crews making final preparations. She walked the grounds alone, thinking about the previous 2 years, everything that had happened, everything she'd learned about herself. The parade grounds began filling at 900 hours. Officers and enlisted personnel arrived in dress uniform, the sight of so many people in formal military attire creating an impressive visual display. They assembled in formation, 700 sailors, the entire command staff, guests from other naval installations. The bleachers filled with family members, local dignitaries, and media representatives from San Diego's major news outlets. By 1,000 hours, more than 2,000 people had assembled. The ceremony began with the national anthem, rendered by a Navy ceremonial band. Sarah stood at attention, her hand over her heart, the familiar notes stirring something deep within her. The Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Patricia Hawkins, took the podium. She'd known Sarah for 20 years, had watched her rise through the ranks, had witnessed her destruction and her rebuilding. "We gather today," Hawkins began, her voice carrying across the grounds, "to recognize the exceptional service of an officer whose leadership has defined what it means to serve with honor, courage, and commitment. Admiral Sarah Chen came to Naval Base San Diego at a pivotal moment in her career and her life. She could have chosen resentment. She could have chosen bitterness. Instead, she chose service." Hawkins spoke for 15 minutes. She discussed Operation Sentinel, how Sarah's strategic judgment had prevented catastrophe. She discussed the pandemic, how Sarah's leadership had kept her personnel safe while maintaining readiness. She discussed the character it takes to be publicly destroyed and then choose to rebuild through authentic action rather than chasing rehabilitation through titles. "Admiral Chen was offered the highest assignments our Navy can offer," Hawkins continued. "She was offered positions that would have placed her among the most powerful military leaders in our nation. She declined those offers to remain here, commanding this base, serving the sailors who depend on her. That decision, to choose authentic service over prestigious advancement, is the definition of exceptional leadership." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. The Distinguished Service Medal is awarded for exceptionally meritorious service in a duty of great responsibility. Admiral Chen has exceeded that standard. She has provided service that is not merely exceptional but transformative. She has demonstrated that integrity cannot be destroyed. It can only be temporarily obscured, and when circumstances permit, it will shine through. Hawkins gestured for Sarah to come forward. Sarah walked across the parade grounds in dress whites, her stride confident, her expression composed. But inside, she felt the weight of every moment, every scandal headline, every false accusation, every night spent awake wondering if she'd ever recover. She stood before Secretary of the Navy Spencer and Admiral Hawkins. The citation was read aloud. "For exceptionally meritorious service from January 2020 to November 2021, while serving as Commander, Naval Base San Diego. Through strategic vision and personal dedication, Admiral Chen transformed Naval Base San Diego into a model installation during unprecedented global crisis. Her leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic prevented loss of life, maintained operational readiness, and demonstrated that military excellence and human compassion are not mutually exclusive. Admiral Chen's decision-making, questioned by some, was proven prescient. Her strategic judgment prevented international incident. Most significantly, Admiral Chen chose service to her personnel over advancement for herself, exemplifying the highest standards of naval leadership. By her professional excellence, unwavering integrity, and commitment to those under her command, Admiral Chen has distinguished herself and reflected great credit upon herself, the Navy, and the Department of Defense." Secretary Spencer stepped forward with the medal. He was a political appointee, not a career military officer, but he understood the significance of this moment. He placed the Distinguished Service Medal around Sarah's neck with ceremony and respect. "Admiral Chen, on behalf of the President and the Department of the Navy, I want to personally thank you for your service and apologize for the anguish you endured. Your integrity is an inspiration to all of us." Sarah nodded, unable to speak without her voice breaking. As she turned to face the assembled crowd, something happened that wasn't planned, wasn't choreographed, wasn't part of the official ceremony. The entire assembly stood simultaneously. All 2,000 people, officers, enlisted personnel, families, visitors, media representatives, stood to their feet. It was an ovation, spontaneous, unscripted, and overwhelming. Sarah felt her composure crack. For the first time in public, in front of cameras and reporters and thousands of witnesses, Admiral Sarah Chen's eyes filled with tears. She'd been publicly destroyed, publicly exonerated, publicly offered the highest positions available, And now she was being publicly recognized not for any of those things, but for who she actually was. A leader, a woman of integrity, someone who'd chosen authenticity over ambition. The applause continued for 3 full minutes. Sarah stood in dress whites with the Distinguished Service Medal around her neck, letting the moment wash over her. Cameras flashed. Phone cameras recorded. News anchors would later describe it as the most powerful moment in modern military ceremony. But to Sarah, it was something simpler and more profound. It was the moment when she finally understood that vindication wasn't something external that happened to you. Vindication was something you created for yourself by consistently choosing integrity, even when no one was watching. When the applause finally subsided, the ceremony continued with formal presentations and remarks. But Sarah heard none of it. She was lost in thought, processing the weight of the moment. That evening, back in her quarters, Sarah sat with Michael and watched the news coverage. CNN ran the headline, "Vindicated: How Admiral Sarah Chen Overcame Scandal to Become a Model of Military Leadership." MSNBC's coverage focused on the pandemic response and how her decisions had saved lives. The local San Diego stations showed interviews with her sailors, all of them expressing gratitude and respect. But what struck Sarah most was a brief clip where a junior petty officer named James Rodriguez, the same young sailor she'd mentored through the pandemic, said simply, "Admiral Chen taught us that leadership isn't about being in charge. It's about serving the people who depend on you. She could have left. She could have moved up. Instead, she stayed because we needed her. That's real leadership." Michael held her hand as they watched. "You did it," he whispered. "You actually did it." But Sarah understood that the real test was still to come. The medal was meaningful, the recognition was important, but it was still external validation. What mattered was what came next. What mattered was the final moment, the one that would define her legacy and her character. That moment was coming in just 6 months. And it would be the most powerful thing anyone had ever witnessed. May 20, 2022, Admiral Sarah Chen's final day in uniform. She'd requested a simple retirement ceremony, nothing elaborate, nothing that made this about her. But the Navy had other ideas. Word had spread through the fleet. Officers from commands across the region requested attendance. Sailors asked for the day off to be present. The media, which had destroyed her and then celebrated her redemption, wanted to document the end of her career. Sarah understood that her story had become bigger than her. It belonged to everyone who'd watched her persevere through impossible circumstances. She arrived at Naval Base San Diego at 600 hours, long before the 1400-hour ceremony. The base was already stirring. Sailors in dress uniform assembled on the parade grounds. The flagpoles were arranged with perfect precision. The morning was clear and bright, the California sun promising another beautiful day. Sarah walked through her headquarters one last time as commander. She visited the operational center where she'd spent countless hours managing the pandemic response. She visited the medical facility where she'd sat with sick sailors. She visited the supply center where Lisa Wong had orchestrated miracles of logistics. She visited the barracks where thousands of her personnel lived and worked. Each place held memories. Each place held meaning. By 1,000 hours, the parade grounds were filled. Sarah had requested that the ceremony be brief. No long speeches, no elaborate tributes, just a formal recognition of her service and a transition to the next commander. Commander James Patterson, her executive officer, was being promoted to take her place. He'd been with her through the pandemic, the vindication, the medal ceremony, and everything in between. The Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Patricia Hawkins, would preside over the ceremony. At exactly 1400 hours, Sarah emerged from her headquarters in dress whites, the Distinguished Service Medal displayed on her uniform, along with the other decorations she'd accumulated over 32 years of service. She walked across the parade grounds with measured steps, the way she'd walked thousands of times before. The ceremony was exactly what she'd requested, brief and dignified. Hawkins gave a short speech acknowledging Sarah's service, not the scandal, not the vindication, but the full arc of her career and what she'd meant to the Navy. She spoke about the importance of choosing integrity over advancement, of leading through authenticity, of serving people rather than positions. Admiral Chen, Hawkins concluded, you came to Naval Base San Diego at a moment when many would have given up. Instead, you chose to serve. You've shown us what true leadership looks like. The Navy salutes you. Sarah accepted the formal retirement certificate. There was a moment of silence, not awkward but ceremonial, the kind of pause that honors a person's passage from active duty into a new chapter of life. Then came the part that wasn't scripted. Commander James Patterson stepped forward in his dress whites. He was an imposing figure, tall, military bearing impeccable, chosen to command because he embodied everything Sarah had taught about leadership. He positioned himself directly in front of Admiral Chen. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Patterson rendered a salute. It wasn't a quick, formal gesture. It was deliberate, prolonged, filled with meaning that went far beyond military protocol. It was a commander saluting an admiral, yes, but it was also a man honoring a woman who'd changed his understanding of what leadership meant. A man who'd watched her lead through crisis, watched her choose her people over advancement, watched her rebuild herself from destruction through authentic action. Patterson held that salute, maintaining perfect form, his arm raised in silent respect. And then, without any command, without any instruction, without anything orchestrated or planned, the entire assembly stood. 700 sailors in dress uniform stood in unison, officers stood, enlisted personnel stood, medical personnel stood, supply officers stood. Every single person on that parade ground came to their feet, and as they stood, they rendered a salute. 700 hands raised simultaneously in a gesture of respect that transcended military protocol and became something purely human. The spontaneous salute lasted 30 seconds, then a minute, then longer. Patterson held his position, unwavering, and behind him, hundreds of voices remained silent except for the sound of the breeze and the distant California traffic. Sarah felt something break open inside her. She'd endured so much. She'd been publicly destroyed, investigated, accused of things she didn't do, exonerated in ways that felt hollow, offered the highest positions available, and turned them down for people who needed her. But this spontaneous, unscripted, completely unrehearsed salute from her entire command, this was the moment when everything made sense. This wasn't vindication from institutions. This wasn't rehabilitation from bureaucracies. This was respect from the people who'd lived under her leadership. This was love from people who'd seen her choose authenticity. This was honor from people who understood what she'd actually accomplished. After nearly 2 minutes, Patterson slowly lowered his salute. The assembled personnel followed suit. He remained standing directly in front of Admiral Chen. Patterson's voice was clear, steady, and filled with emotion. Admiral Chen, I am honored to succeed you as commander of Naval Base San Diego. Before I assume this position, I need to say something on behalf of every person on this base, every sailor who has served under your command, and every officer who has witnessed your leadership during the most challenging years of our service. Patterson's voice grew stronger. You came to us when your reputation had been destroyed. You came to us when powerful people wanted to end your career. You came to us carrying wounds that should have broken you. Instead of bitterness, you brought service. Instead of resentment, you brought compassion. Instead of climbing toward promotion, you stayed with us because we needed you. Patterson paused, his eyes glistening. You taught us that leadership isn't about titles or positions or rank. Leadership is about choosing to show up every single day for the people who depend on you. You taught us that integrity cannot be destroyed. It can only be temporarily hidden, and then it shines through. You taught us what it means to be truly courageous, not the courage to face enemies, but the courage to face yourself and choose to be better. His voice carried across the entire base. Welcome back, Admiral, not to a position or a rank, but to yourself. You never left us. We were just waiting for you to come home. Sarah's composure finally shattered. For the second time in public, tears streamed down her face. But these weren't tears of pain or vindication or relief. They were tears of recognition. Tears acknowledging that she'd finally completed her journey, that she'd taken the worst thing that could happen to a military officer, public destruction of reputation, and transformed it into something meaningful. She did not speak. There were no words adequate to the moment. Instead, she raised her hand and rendered a final salute to the command she was leaving, a salute of gratitude, a salute of respect, a salute acknowledging that these people had saved her as much as she'd served them. She turned and walked toward the gates of Naval Base San Diego, flanked by her honor guard. Behind her, as she walked, the entire assembly came to attention one final time, but no one spoke, no one moved. They simply watched her go, a woman who'd faced destruction and chosen to rebuild not through climbing ladders but through serving people, a woman who'd turned scandal into wisdom, a woman who'd proven that integrity was worth more than any position. As Sarah reached the gates and prepared to step through them, to leave active duty, to leave the Navy, to leave behind the uniform she'd worn for 32 years, Patterson's voice cut through the silence one final time. Admiral, we will remember you, not for what was done to you, but for what you chose to do with it. Semper Paratus. Always ready, the Navy's motto, a reminder that Sarah had always been ready, ready to serve, ready to lead, ready to be better than her circumstances demanded. Sarah paused at the gate. She did not turn back. She did not need to. Everything that needed to be said had been said in that spontaneous salute, in that moment when an entire command stood as one to honor the woman who'd chosen their welfare over her own advancement. She stepped through the gates into her civilian life, carrying with her something far more valuable than any medal, any title, any position the Pentagon could have offered. She carried the respect of people who'd seen her lead with integrity. She carried the knowledge that she'd chosen authentically. She carried the understanding that vindication wasn't something external that happened to you. It was something you created for yourself through relentless, authentic service. Behind her, as she walked away, Commander James Patterson stood at attention. And from 700 throats came a single, unified sound, not a salute, not a cheer, but something older and deeper. It was the sound of respect, the sound of gratitude, the sound of a military unit saying goodbye to a leader who'd changed them forever. Admiral Sarah Chin did not look back. She didn't need to. She already knew what was behind her. She was moving toward what lay ahead. The end.